welcome. I'm Ijoma Runyato. Tonight, Nigeria and the United Arab Emirates signed agreements on recovery of illegally transferred funds, also in trade and judicial matters. PDP National Publicity Secretary Olisa Metu brought in handcuffs to the Federal High Court Abuja, later granted bail in the sum of 400 million naira. National Assembly reads letter from President Muhammadu Buhari on amendments to 2016 budget. Lawmakers to begin debate on the document. And the United Nations says violence suffered by civilians in Iraq remains staggering.
And on business news tonight, Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele appears before the Senate over the dwindling value of the naira.
And on sports news tonight, Coach Sunday Olise commends the Super Eagles for their impressive performance against Niger at the African Nations Championship.
And from Abuja, I'm Linda Akibe. Nigerian Bar Association and the National Human Rights Commission take a deep look into the clash between the army and Shiites in Zaria.
We start off tonight from the United Arab Emirates, where Nigeria and the UAE today signed 6 agreements in Abu Dhabi to enhance bilateral relations between the two countries. The signing of the agreements on trade, finance and judicial matters was witnessed by President Muhammadu Buhari and the Crown Prince of the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Nigeria's Minister of Finance, Mrs. Kemi Adeosun, and the UAE Minister of State for Financial Affairs, Obaid Atayar, signed the Avoidance of Double Taxation Agreement, while the Minister of Trade and Investment, Mr. Ukechukwu Enelema, signed the Agreement on Trade, Promotion and Protection with the UAE Minister of State for Financial Affairs. Other agreements signed include the judicial agreements on extradition, transfer of sentenced persons, mutual legal assistance on criminal. Reiterated his commitment to fighting corruption and restoring Nigeria's dignity in the Committee of Nations. The president also urged all Islamic countries to support the fight against terrorism in Nigeria and denounced the atrocities of Boko Haram as un-Islamic and against the teachings of the Holy Prophet. In his remarks, the Crown Prince Zayed Al Nahyan said that the relationship between Nigeria and the UAE will be strengthened by the president's visit and the signing of the agreements. And back here, the National Publicity Secretary of the People's Democratic Party, Mr. Olisa Metu, was brought to the Federal High Court Abuja today in handcuffs to answer a 7-count charge of corruption, money laundering and breach of trust. He was granted bail in the sum of 400 million naira with 2 sureties, following ruling on his bail application by the presiding judge, Justice Obong Abang. Our correspondent Amaka Okafor reports.
The National Publicity Secretary of the People's Democratic Party, Mr. Olisa Metu, who has been in prison custody, arrived at the court in handcuffs. Inside the court, defense lawyers and the prosecution argued the application for bail filed by Mr. Metu. In his argument, the prosecutor, Mr. Silvanus Tahir, asked the court to reject his application for bail. He told the courts that according to Section 163 of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, Metu cannot be granted bail because he attempted to destroy evidence against him. He told the courts that he had a counter affidavit to depose to the fact that there was a tendency and propensity which he exhibited which shows he will interfere with the trial and impede justice. But counsel to the accused person, Mr. Chris Uche, told the courts that the anti-graft agency has not brought any evidence or documents to support its claims. As such, it is a mere speculation. He said there is no evidence to show that his client told the statements he made to the commission and therefore he should be granted bail.
Bail has been granted, and as you know, bail must be granted with conditions. So these conditions have been enumerated, and it is therefore our responsibility to comply with the conditions.
Mr. Uche criticized the anti-graft agency for bringing his client to court in handcuffs. He asked the court to call the prison authorities to order, saying his client is still innocent until proven otherwise.
The fight against corruption must be done in a most decent manner. It must be carried out within the ambits of the rule of law. we feel there was no need for that. But the court has noted that, and I don't think now that he's going to be on bail, that has been overtaken.
Justice Obong Abang admitted Mr. Metu to bail and fixed trial for the 25th of January 2016. He, however, asked the anti-graft agency to ensure that it has all of its witnesses ready for trial. But pending the fulfillment of his bail condition, Mr. Metu will remain in prison custody. Amaka Okafu, Channels Television News.
The Senate has accepted and adopted the alterations in the 2016 budget made by President Buhari. The President had sent a letter to the Senate notifying the lawmakers of some corrections in the 2016 budget. In the letter read on the floor by the Senate President, Dr. Bukola Saraki, President Buhari stated that although there are some alterations in the budget, the figure remains the same. The Senate consequently directed its leadership to distribute the budget with the alterations, and debate on the budget is to begin on Wednesday, January the 20th.
It will be recalled that on Tuesday, 22nd December 2015, I presented my 2016 budget proposals to the joint sitting of the National Assembly. I submitted a draft bill accompanied by a schedule of details. At the time of submission, we indicated that because the details had just been produced and will have had to check to ensure that there were no errors in the detailed breakdown contained in the schedule. That has since been completed, and I understand that the corrections have been submitted. The National Assembly will therefore have the details as submitted on the 22nd and a copy containing the corrections submitted last week. It appears that this has led to some confusion. In this regard, please find attached the corrected version. This is the version the National Assembly should work with as my 2016 budget estimates. The draft bill remains the same, and there are no changes in any of the figures.
Senate President Dr. Bukola Saraki. Now let's get an economic perspective beyond the controversy surrounding the budget. I'm now being joined on the News at 10 by an economist, Mr. Femi Dagmuru. Thank you so much for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you for having me.
Now, from the President's letter, well, we now know that it's the corrected version of the budget that they're debating on the floor. We know that the draft bill remains the same and the figure is the same. But beyond that, there are concerns from economists like yourself about the benchmark being 38. What do you make of it?
Well, actually, the benchmark of 38 is something you cannot just change. You can fix it today and tomorrow you change it, but we can leave it as it is. Despite the fact that a couple of people will say, listen, this is too high, because we are seeing the oil. The prices are just going down, and nobody can really say. Some analysts will tell you that oil will soon go down to about $20 or $10 at worst case scenario. But what we are looking at is, you know, from the onset, we have to understand that we are going to have a deficit budget. And then how do we fund this, or how do we finance it is an issue. So if the oil is going downwards, I mean, you see the sluggishness in the market, and people are losing money right now. So the question we should be asking ourselves is, how do we fund this project? It's a deficit budget, no doubt about that. And for how long can we continue to manage our economy on a deficit budget?
So are you saying there are going to be further alterations beyond the ones we see now?
Well, chances are. I mean, it might not be the final. We're not seeing the final analysis here. We're not seeing the final point of this yet. This is just a benchmark. A benchmark is just you're setting a standard. So if it needs to be reviewed, definitely the government will go back, and the federal government will go back and say, look, let's review this. The presidency has to approach the Senate once again.
Well, what many people are waiting for is the progression, you know, the passing right through, and then action. What key areas of the budget do you think will be hot topics when the debate begins? Yeah,
it depends on how senators, if they want to be bipartisan, I think they will look at it critically beyond a one-party kind of group saying this is just let go. But we have to look at it. The critical area is infrastructure. And we have to understand that infrastructure is very, very critical to this economy and to this nation at this point in time. And the issue of agriculture, if there are loopholes, where are you now going to get the money? We have to be looking at the internally generated revenue, the IGR. And let's be realistic at a point here. there's no way you can continue to manage this economy without increasing your VAT, without finding means at which you can fund, apart from just going to the market and, say you want to have bonds, and all the stuff. You continue to do that, but how do you raise some financial points have to be made that technically there are other areas that the federal government, I stand to be corrected, that they still have to increase, maybe as it was planned before, that you have to have these increase in the area of VAT. We have a very low, and most people may not like what I'm saying, but we have a very, very low VAT, 5%. So these, in my own opinion, may have to be increased. But please, if you want to increase that, you have to prepare the masses. You don't just wake up and say, look, you want to increase the VAT. You have to prepare the masses for that. The public has to be aware that, look, if you increase the VAT from 5% to whatever percent, 10% or 12%, progressively, then you have to see that what effect would that have on the household? And what would that have on the retail sector, on the manufacturing sector? But at the same time, it could be another avenue to, boost the economy, because then you see that people may have to spend more, and to really, the government will have more in their pocket. So there could be so many ways that the government can internally, they can generate funds. So they have to look at that. And those are the areas that, the Senate will be looking at. Okay, we have this problem. How do we solve it?
Thank you so much, the economist, Mr. Femi Dagboro, for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us on the News at 10 tonight. Well, in part two, after the break, the Chief of Defence Staff, General Gabriel Olonishakin, visits the Senate, also testifies before the National Human Rights Commission panel on the clash between the army and Shiites in Kaduna State. That's all coming up in a moment. Join us again.